Riku Live Versus Dark, and today we're going to start the first actual, somewhat professional anime review. I'm going to get this bandana on, and let's get started. Okay, so today's topic of review is Elfen Lied. Elfen Lied is a story about this somewhat advanced human race called the Diclonius. These Diclonius have these weird psychic powers where they can get these, they're called vectors, but they really are just spiritual hands that can, like, pretty much fuck shit up, to be really basic. And this story follows one who broke out of the lab. It wasn't really a home, but she was pretty much at the home. She broke out of this lab and eventually managed to somehow make her way to shore. And in the process, she lost all her memory and reverted to this weird state where she couldn't even speak English. She's founded by these two cousins, Koda and Yuka. She's founded by these two and taken in. And all of a sudden, they slowly start to realize that she isn't really human, which was blatantly obvious by the fact that these Diclonius have these horns on their head, which I'm pretty sure are somehow psychic channelers or something like that. Don't quote me on that, though. And they essentially take her in and start caring for her and everything, and slowly the story starts to piece together into this epic finale. Epic, sad, depressing, whatever. The story itself, it's really interesting if you can stay on to it. As you progress through the anime, you get smacked by all this backstory of these characters. Like, Koda has a huge backstory of how when he first came to town, his cousin went to some festival and shit went to hell fast. Eventually you meet this homeless girl who leaves home because she was raped by her father. The backstory is pretty much fucked up. The entire backstory is fucked up. And you get smacked by all this backstory. You sometimes forget, okay, she just did this, and she did this for this reason, but, what was the main plot again? It really does happen. It happened to me halfway through the anime. I'm like, wait a minute, what's going on again? There's so much freaking backstory that you lose track of what's going on. But the backstory, if you like backstory, that's a good thing, but, again, too much of it. And it does at least manage to build somewhat of a relationship with these characters. Like, you'll all of a sudden get this somewhat emotional attachment to, shit, what was her name? Or what was his name? Friggin', I don't remember, but there's this head scientist guy who, his job at one point were to go to these people's children, and if they were Diclonius, his job was to freaking kill them. Killing their kids, and you get this emotional attachment, and you're like, shit man, this guy's job sucked. And then eventually, you learn that actually his kid turned out to be a Diclonius, and too much spoiler, it's just fucked up. The characters themselves, though, you have some variety, but not so much. You only have about 3, 4, 5 main characters who you get emotional attachment, but it never really pulls through. Like, you're like, okay, so she was sad, this was so sad, yet it never really connects. Like, you realize, oh shit, but yeah, exactly, that's it. You're just there, you get this attachment, but it never pulls through. You have about 4 characters that you can get attached to. Koda, his cousin Yuka, the homeless girl, sorry, what was her name? I have it here. Mayu, and this other Diclonius, Nana, along with the main character slash Diclonius, Lucy slash New. New is the alter personality that she doesn't remember anything, yet Lucy, she remembers everything. Now, while you have these 4 characters, you also have a few side characters who are essentially the bad guys. There's the sorry, I'm not good with names, remembering names, but there's this guy who's friggin' mercenary, and he gets his hands and just his hands ripped off by Lucy and blinded, and he all of a sudden just wants to kill all not all of them, but the Diclonius that caused him to lose his arms and eyes. Then there's the scientist guy whose name I can never remember. He's another character that you actually get a good backstory of and you can get an attachment to, but it just never pulls through. Characters not really varied. I'll be completely honest. You have somewhat variety with the 4, 5, 6 main characters, but they're all pretty much somewhat generic. Like the homeless child, she ran away from home, standard, ran away, get taken in by these nice people. What's her name? Fuck. Okay, so you have these 5 characters, and you pretty much have to pick one that you truly like. Like, I found I kind of like the mercenary guy. But they never really show much emotion. They mostly show one emotion. Like, Mayu shows kind of shyness / happiness. Yuka shows, what's the word, not really sadness, but, she's kind of sad that Koda doesn't really remember her, but she is also somewhat happy that he's here, and she's kind of the weird female who doesn't really show one true emotion. She's the one character who kind of flip-flops between various things. New, Lucy's alter ego, is kind of, more or less kind of happy-go-lucky, just trying to constantly make everybody happy kind of thing. Lucy herself is kind of she knows she wants to destroy the entire human race, but Koda, some guilt with the history between Koda that I'm not going to spoil, brings her to she has some liking, I guess, of the human race or something like that. I don't really know the word for it. I can't really put it into words. The guy who pretty much gets completely destroyed by Lucy pretty much shows mostly rage, and the scientist guy, I guess he shows some emotion between him and the Diclonius and his child ordeal and etc, 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 but he doesn't really show that much except towards this one Diclonius, Nana, who gets introduced later, she was originally supposed to track down and kill Lucy, but well, actually she was just supposed to track her, but then she tried to kill her and then loses her arms and legs, and I'm not going to get into that because I'm spoiling too much story already if you actually want to watch this. Music-wise, it's mostly a weird can't speak today. It's a weird orchestral, and while the opening never changes, and it doesn't really show much, it doesn't really show what the anime is, but the orchestral and the anime itself managed to tell a story. Like, when you learn the backstory of Lucy and the weird orphanage hospital thing, when you're figuring that out, it manages to spell the sadness when shit starts to go down, and manages to spell happiness when she finally meets Koda. It does manage to play its role, but if you don't really like orchestral, it's kind of a negative, I'll be completely honest. There's not really much variety. That's why I have an orchestral mix. But it does manage to show its emotion, so it's not a complete negative. Like I said, the backstory really is fucked. It's really dark for a backstory, and it really does drown you in trying to learn the history of these characters. The story itself does manage to pull off somewhat of a... Story itself, it's followable, it's not that bad, it's not that good either. The anime itself is pretty meh, in my opinion. Like, it's not completely bad, like some people say. Like, one dude, I forget his name now, completely told me just to skip the anime because it sucked. I actually watched it. It didn't suck. It's not as bad as other animes I've seen. It's about a 6 out of 10. It's got a good mix of it's got a fair mix of characters. It's not bad for an anime itself. The music is, I don't really like orchestral, but it still works. The characters are kind of iffish in my opinion, and overall it is a good 6 out of 10. It's not bad, it's not good. I wouldn't really recommend it to most people, but it's not that bad. Is there anything else I'm missing? Characters, music, understand. No, I got everything. I covered about everything that truly matters in an anime. If you want to being this is my first legit review, if you have any suggestions, I will take them. And for my next review, which I shall show a sneak peek at the end of this. But for now, I'm actually out. Farewell.